A jiangshi, also known as a Chinese hopping vampire or zombie, is a type of reanimated corpse in Chinese legends. It is typically depicted as a stiff corpse dressed in official garments, and it moves around by hopping with its arms outstretched. Most Chinese people look forward to February more than any other month of the year. This is because it just so happens to be Chinese New Year, and it is customary for families to get together, to eat dinner together and celebrate a week during and up to Chinese New Year. In Western society, family dinners usually occur at home. In China, however, most of these gatherings occur at Dian, basically Chinese for restaurant. The exact reason I don't know, but I suspect it's because restaurants in China are typically cheaper than Western restaurants, and the fact that for not much extra, you can book a private room with a TV, a mahjong table, sofas, etc. It should also be known that Chinese cuisine is much different than Western cuisine. I know this because I have lived in China. While most Western cuisine consists of a starter, a main course, and a dessert, traditional Chinese cuisine, it consists simply of many different fried, baked, sautéed dishes, alongside some dumplings, rice or noodles. Thus, a typical Chinese meal, it has significantly more dishes, and as such, usually after a meal, a lot of food is left to waste. When my mother and I arrived in Tongling to spend the week before Chinese New Year, we of course had to attend family dinner with our relatives. On the evening of our arrival, we were scheduled to have dinner at MeiHua. But since it was fully booked, we had to go to another restaurant nearby. Normally, I would hate dining with my relatives. Having lived in the West for most of my life, I was just not really used to Chinese culture, which consisted largely of shouting and laughing and drinking way too much white wine. However, this year was different. It had been a long time since the last time I went to China, so I was quite taken aback when I realized my cousins were already attending their first year of high school. This was good news. I'm only 18 myself, so finally, I had people to talk to who were roughly similar in age. The dinner was alright. Soups, meats, vegetables, all that original jazz. Me and my cousins, Andong and Zuquang, we finished our meal before everyone else was even half full. We quickly found out that without a phone and limited space, we really had nothing to do after we finished. We ended up just catching up on current events with each other, and we waited for the adults to finish eating and talking. Now, I should mention, a lot of food was wasted that day, but that's typical. We said our goodbyes and me and my mother went to stay at my grandmother's, while everyone else went back to their homes. The next evening, we booked at MeiHua again, and this time, we were successful in securing a room. The thing about MeiHua is that it is absolutely huge. It's actually part Dian, part Niagan hotel. So, there were a total of 6 floors, not including the basement and garage parking, instead of the conventional 3-floor setup. My cousins and I, along with the rest of our relatives and close family members, we all met there at about 6 p.m.-ish. The older people played cards and my cousins and I watched a Chinese war movie. Eventually, the waiters brought all 20-something different dishes on the table. Oddly enough, The food we ordered were roughly the same dishes and they tasted roughly identical to the ones we had had yesterday. This kind of bothered me more than it should have. Andong and Zuquang finished before everyone else. We first started playing with some simple games, just to pass the time. And when we got bored, I came up with the idea of playing hide and seek. So mature, right? My cousins loved this idea, and we quickly set out some ground rules. Number 1, absolutely no going into any room other than our own. Number 2, no going outside MeiHua. Number 3, no hiding in the girls' washroom. And number 4, the seeker must count for 30 seconds in the original room where dinner is taking place before seeking. We played rock, paper, scissors to determine the seeker, and for the very first round of the game, Zuquang lost and became the seeker. This left Andong and I to hide. Trying to be the older and mature cousin, I listened to Andong and followed wherever he went to hide. But I quickly realized after the third or fourth round that he just likes to stay in the second or main lobby. This got really boring really quickly, and pretty soon I was tired of always being caught. On the 6th or 7th round, Andong was the seeker, and I managed to convince Zuquang to hide in the 4th floor. We took the elevator together to get to the 4th, and we realized soon enough that the 4th floor was simply the Nirguan part of MeiHua. Since there were not many places to hide, we went back inside the elevator and we tried to take it all the way to the 6th floor. I say tried, because no matter how frequently or how hard we pressed the number 6, the elevator only took us to the 5th floor. It was programmed to only go to the 5th. Whatever. We needed a place to hide, and we couldn't ride the elevator back down. What happens if Andong is waiting for us? Since the 5th floor was almost identical to the 4th, we didn't have many places to hide, so we decided to split up. I would run to the left and Zuquang right. I ended up waiting a long time on the 5th floor. As a matter of fact, I waited about 10 minutes. Just when I thought Andong had pussied out, I heard rapid footsteps coming in my direction. I panicked. After finally getting to the 5th floor, no way in hell was I going to get caught. I sprinted to the end of the hallway, and quickly I came to a dead end with an open window that seemed to lead outside to the roof of MeiHua. The footsteps were approaching closer and closer, and me taking my hide and seek seriously, I climbed out of that window onto the roof of the 5th floor to avoid getting caught. The view sucked. I saw a bunch of dirty apartments. I saw the main road nearby and other things. But most importantly, I saw no place to hide. However, I did see another open window somewhere to the left of the roof, and I figured that if I didn't climb through it, Andong would surely find me, and I was not going to let that happen. I sprinted towards that other window and climbed through, presumably back inside the building. Inside was pretty dark, faintly illuminated by a few dying light bulbs. There weren't any rooms, only a staircase in which, without thinking, I sprinted up. At the time, I hadn't realized I had arrived at the 6th floor. I did realize, just briefly, that the 6th floor was just another Nirguan floor. However, it was different from the others. The floors were carpeted and red instead of tiled, and the walls, they were painted golden instead of brown. The only thing that remained similar between the 4th and 5th and the 6th was that they all had the same wooden doors, just with different numbers. As I was running down the hallway, past the rooms of the 6th floor, I felt adrenaline and anxiety. Adrenaline from the realization that I still heard footsteps behind me, that Andong had somehow grown a pair of balls and was chasing after me, and the anxiety after I realized that the 6th floor was completely deserted. However, Andong was chasing after me, and I ended up running all the way until I reached a dead end, and also room 673, the last room of MeiHua, and the last room of the 6th floor. I couldn't really quite hear Andong anymore, but I knew that he was coming in my direction, and I knew that he was going to catch up anytime soon. And thus, in the spur of the moment, I decided to break rule number 1. I entered room 673. I closed the room door in front of me, and immediately I pressed my ear against the room door, listening intently for Andong's footsteps. Have you ever felt true terror? I can't describe it. Those of you who may have come across a near life and death experience, you may have felt this a little bit. But even then, I guarantee you, you have not felt the fear that I felt in that moment. I felt true terror when I realized that 673 wasn't locked. Shouldn't hotel rooms be locked? And instead of hearing footsteps, what I heard was a faint slurping and chewing sound. It reminded me of the sound that my dad made when he came home from work hungry one day and just stuffed his face in rice. I froze, and I continued to listen to the sound of something hungry. Eventually, after what felt like hours, I turned around, and there it was. It was tall, probably 6'1". It had a humanoid figure with long arms and comically large hands, and about 5 long and bony fingers attached. It was bent over a large bucket. I couldn't really see its face at the time, but it was wearing a blue silk robe with golden patterns, and it wore this Chinese hat that resembled something from the Ming dynasty. It continued eating until it finally must have noticed that it was not there alone. Because right then, this thing stopped eating and darted its head in my direction, like it had been caught stealing, and it stared straight at my face, all while still hunched over. Its skin was unnaturally white, not even albino white. Its skin was paper white, and for its height, its head was way too large, and it was perfectly spherical. Its eyes, they were 2 perfectly circular dots of pure red, and this thing's mouth, it looked identical to what a 6-year-old would draw on a stick figure. A simple curved line which had bits of beef and noodles hanging out. And then I realized that whatever it was eating our leftovers. We locked eyes for what seemed again a long time. Its red and circular eyes, they sent chills down my spine. This thing was smiling at me. That's what it was. A smiley face, stuck on a human body, wearing traditional Chinese clothes. It then stood, perfectly vertical, and it stuck out both its arms parallel to the ground, as if ready to push something. And then, it hopped towards me. Something must have kicked in, because I pulled open that door and I ran as fast as I could down the hallway. It was surprisingly fast, considering that it was hopping. I continued to run down the hallway, eventually hiding in the stall of one of the abandoned men's washrooms. I expected to hear the hopping sound, but instead, I heard footsteps run past me. My heart sank. In my moment of terror, I forgot that Andong was still chasing me. I heard his footsteps quieten as he ran towards 673. Shortly after, I heard a blood-curdling scream and the sound of bones breaking and flesh tearing. I ran out of that washroom stall, crying in fear and crying in guilt for letting Andong get caught by that thing. I ran and I cried down the stairs that led to the 6th floor. I ran and cried, climbing through the window into the 5th. And I ran and I cried all the way back to our room, where I was met with startled looks. I blabbered out about everything. About the monster, about its red eyes and its creepy smile. I blabbered about how it chased me down the hallway and how it had eaten Andong. And then I saw Andong, sitting on the sofa, staring at me. I let out a sigh of relief and I rushed over to give him the biggest hug of my life. I cried into his arms and I told him how happy I was to see him alive. It took a very long time for everyone to calm me down. Eventually, when I did, I urged my mum and my grandma to leave right then. Whatever the thing was on the 6th floor, MeiHua was hiding it. They were feeding it our leftovers. I asked Andong how he got back to the room before me, and he told me he never went to the 6th floor. He said the elevator didn't go up that high. He said that the main staircase didn't go to the 6th either. He said that he only went up to the 5th. He said he got bored looking for us. And he said that he was in this room 10 minutes before I arrived. Before I could even piece together what I'd heard, everyone stood up and said goodbye to one another. And then I heard one of the relatives ask, and I will never forget these words in my life, "Where is Zhu Quang?"